Hello everyone. Welcome back to the Best Anime Recap channel. On this occasion, I will continue the discussion of the second part of the Tokyo Revengers anime storyline. Where in the first part of the Tokyo Revengers anime storyline, Takemichi Hanagaki finally found out how the cause of the Draken could be killed, and it was also revealed that Atsushi Sendu or Akun was the one who pushed Takemichi Hanagaki onto the train track, ending with Akun jumping from the top of the building. Draken apparently realized that Takemichi was following him, while Takemichi now plans to investigate Mobius before August 3rd, the day Draken finally died. At the beginning of Part 2 of Tokyo Revengers, a little story of Draken's life is told. Draken was born in the Red District of Shibuya. His mother was a prostitute and left him when he was 2 years old, while he did not know who his father was. Little Draken lives in a massage parlor. Draken got his first tattoo when he was in 5th grade. His body is bigger than children his age, plus a tattoo on his head that even middle school kids are afraid of him. From the Samayama gang, Draken initially knew Mikey. He was assigned to bring Mikey to the Samayama gang. Hearing that Mikey succeeded in defeating the Bachikan gang leader, Draken was actually excited and felt challenged to a duel with Mikey. But he was surprised to see the figure of Mikey, whose small body was far from what he had imagined. Draken did not invite him to a duel and immediately asked Mikey to meet Samayama's gang. When they arrived at the Samayama gang hangout, Mikey immediately attacked the Samayama gang leader without further ado, and the others fled in fear. Mikey then asked Draken to be his friend, and since then they have become inseparable friends. Takemichi returns to the present. He and Naoto try to meet Osanai, the former chairman of Mobius. They were quite surprised to see Osanai, who is now a construction worker. Takemichi and Naoto ask Osanai about his fight against the Tokyo Manji or Tumen gangs that occurred 12 years ago. Osanai tearfully reveals that it was not his side that killed Draken, and after the fight an internal conflict arose in Tumen. The death of Draken was someone's trick, but Osanai refused to say who it was because he no longer wanted to be involved with Tumen. Takemichi and Naoto conclude that someone is plotting the split of Tumen, by turning Mikey and Draken into a feud. Both agreed that the duel between Tumen and Mobius should not happen. Takemichi then returned to the past for the umpteenth time. In the past, Takemichi appeared while cycling with Akun. Takemichi then went to Tumen and asked Mikey to cancel the duel with Mobius, arguing that Tumen was being framed. Takemichi instead was hit by Pa-chin. Even so, Takemichi did not give up. He fell to his knees asking them to cancel the duel plan. Draken considered Takemichi's words and suggested Mikey to investigate Mobius first. But Mikey thought that Draken was against Tumen's wishes. Mikey's reaction was quite a shock to Draken because he didn't mean it that way. Not long after that, suddenly Osanai appeared towards them. Osanai did not come alone. He came with his gang and was ready to attack Tumen first. This was a very unequal fight. Tumen was only 5 people including Takemichi, while the number of Mobius was very large. Pa-chin advances first against Osanai, but Osanai makes Pa-chin's face battered and ends in Pa-chin's defeat. Next, Mikey stepped up and knocked down Osanai with just one shot to the head. Osanai tries to attack again by holding the bottle. Draken comes forward and defeats him. Even though outnumbered, this fight was won by Tumen. Just as they were about to disperse because they heard the siren of a police car, suddenly Pa-chin stabbed Osanai with a knife from behind. The police finally arrived and Pa-chin chose to turn himself in, while the rest fled so as not to be caught by the police. When Takemichi wakes up in the hospital, he is only accompanied by Emma. Takemichi is surprised when Emma tells that when he fainted, Mikey and Draken were at odds again and the problem only got bigger. The two of them argued about what they would do after Pa-chin was arrested by the police. Tumen is split into 2 camps between Mikey and Draken. Tumen's internal feud has begun. After his condition began to recover, Takemichi was allowed to rest at home and Draken came to visit him. Draken told that Pa-chin was sentenced to approximately 1 year in prison while Osanai survived. Draken was angry when Takemichi asked him how Mikey was. He emphatically said no longer in touch with Mikey and Tumen was over. When Draken was about to leave in front of Takemichi's house, Mikey was already there. The two higher-ups met again by accident because they both wanted to visit Takemichi. They started bickering over trivial things. Takemichi tried to separate them but his efforts were in vain. Mikey threw Takemichi's bicycle at Draken and a fight between the two was in sight. Takemichi's emotions suddenly peaked. He told Mikey and Draken to stop what they were doing. Takemichi scolded Mikey and Draken. He said that Mikey and Draken did not understand that their enmity could trouble those around them. Takemichi then bent his body and knelt down. Without realizing it, tears started streaming down his face. He began to warn the two higher-ups of Tumen that those who followed them could also become enemies. When Takemichi was still upset while crying, Mikey suddenly told him that there was dirt on Takemichi's head. Suddenly Draken and Mikey laughed and ran away together. Thanks to the dirt on Takemichi's head, the tension between Mikey and Draken finally melted away. They sat together in the garden and Draken began to say that he was at fault. Mikey also apologized. When Takemichi was curious and asked about the cause of their fight, both of them answered in unison that they had forgotten. Takemichi realized that he had changed history because the two high-ranking Tumens had made up and Draken would not have died in a fight. Soon enough, Hinata came and took Takemichi to the festival on August 3, the day Draken was killed. On August 3, 2005, Takemichi and Draken were waiting for Hinata and Emma in front of the festival. Hinata and Emma came after wearing beautiful kimonos. The four of them did a double date. When it rains, Takemichi and Hinata take shelter under a tree. When the romantic atmosphere began to awaken and Takemichi was about to kiss Hinata, suddenly Yamagishi called him. Yamagishi asked Takemichi to warn Draken to be careful because the Mikey camp that had formed when the two were fighting was targeting Draken. Even though Mikey and Draken have made up, the Mikey camp that was formed still doesn't accept it. Takemichi was surprised and rushed to find Draken. He was forced to leave Hinata. While searching for Draken, Takemichi saw several members of Tumen and Kiyomasa. But one of their gang caught Takemichi, who was eavesdropping on their conversation. They started beating Takemichi and tying him up. Takemichi was left tied up and it was raining heavily. Luckily Hinata found him. But because he was embarrassed by his situation, Takemichi asked Hinata to leave. Instead of obeying Takemichi's words, Hinata kissed him and gave him encouragement. Takemichi gets new energy from Hinata and he goes back to looking for Draken. On the way he runs into Mitsuya, who says Paon wants to attack Draken, while Takemichi says Kiyomasa is the one. Paon doesn't like Draken, who opposes Tumen's intention to release Pa Chin on bail. Meanwhile, Draken, who was walking with Emma, was approached by Paon from behind. Paon thinks that Tumen has abandoned Pa Chin, who is in prison. Paon eventually allied with the rest of Mobius gang to fight Draken. The fight ensued even though it was a very unfair fight because Draken was alone against Paon and Mobius gang. Takemichi and Mitsuya managed to find Draken in a parking lot. When Mitsuya was ready to intervene to help Draken, suddenly Mikey came. Draken and Mitsuya immediately recognized the sound of a motorbike driven by Mikey. Apparently Mikey was framed by being invited to meet in a different place from the location where Draken was attacked. This has been planned by Hanma Shuji, the interim chairman of Mobius, to replace Osanai. When Hanma ordered his men to start attacking Mikey, Draken, Mitsuya and Takemichi, the division captains and members of Tumen followed suit. And now their numbers are even against Mobius. And there was a big fight between Tumen and Mobius. Tumen had the upper hand and managed to beat Mobius. Mikey then approached Paon. Several times Paon's fist landed on Mikey's face, which was deliberately left. Mikey tried to talk heart to heart with Paon, who didn't accept Tumen didn't do anything about Pa Chin. Hit me until you're satisfied. I don't want to fight with you, so assume this is over and come back, said Mikey quietly. Paon finally wakes up and cries in front of Mikey. Meanwhile Takemichi keeps trying to find Draken in the midst of the fight between the two gangs. Takemichi suddenly passed Kiyomasa, but Takemichi was very surprised to see the bloodied knife Kiyomasa was holding. Not far from where Takemichi was standing, he saw Draken lying on the floor covered in blood. Takemichi approached Draken and called out his name, but Draken remained unmoved. In a very angry state to know Draken was injured, Mikey was about to approach him, But suddenly Hanma came to stop him. Hanma is tough enough to fight Mikey, so their duel is quite even. Because he still has to fight Hanma, Mikey finally asks Takemichi to take care Draken. Takemichi then carried Draken to take him to the hospital. On the way, Takemichi met Hinata and Emma. They had apparently called an ambulance. They decided to wait for the ambulance to arrive. Not long after, Kiyomasa and several members of the Mobius gang came up to them. Draken woke up and called Takemichi's name. Draken thanked him and asked Takemichi to run away with Hinata and Emma. Hearing this made Takemichi's emotions overflow. Tears welled up in his eyes again, but this time he was determined not to run away and become a braver person. Takemichi bravely challenges Kiyomasa and says their previous duel is not over yet. Draken said he bet 100 million yen on Takemichi's win. Hinata and Emma said the same thing. The duel between Takemichi and Kiyomasa finally continued, but unfortunately the duel had just begun. Kiyomasa had stabbed Takemichi's left palm. Takemichi did not give up. He kept trying to fight Kiyomasa in various ways, until finally he managed to defeat Kiyomasa. Even so, Takemichi still has to face the Mobius gang members who are in front of him. He then asks Hinata and Emma to run away immediately. The second duel ensued. This time Takemichi and Draken had to face Mobius with the remaining strength they had. Luckily Akun and other Takemichi friends suddenly came to help, but they were just as badly beaten by Mobius. Not long after, a police car siren sounded from a distance. The second part of the Tokyo Revengers anime storyline ends here. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.